Hello dear friends, this is the first session for the course S27021 YCMOU Maharashtra, and the course name is Population and Health Hazards. So here in this session we are going to study about demographic parameters, and now before going to study actual topic, that is demographic parameters, let us first go through the syllabus of S27021, that is Population and Health Hazards. So here the course code number, as already stated, it is S27021, and the name of this course, it is Pollution and Health Hazards. Totally there are 4 units in this course which we are going to study one by one. The first unit, it is related to environment, and it is 1.1 which is related to environmental health. 1.2, it is related to environmental pollution and health hazards. And 2.1, this is a topic which is related to industrial pollution and human health. 2.2, it is related to water pollution and human health. In the third topic, we will cover water pollution and human health. And 3.2, it will cover industrial hazards. 4.1, it will be about housekeeping and safety regulations. And here 4.2, it will be related to occupational hazards. So let's begin with the first unit, that is environmental health. And to go to the introductory part, we can see here that there is a definition which is given by World Health Organization's Constitution. It defines environmental health as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And here this definition, it indicates that physically, mentally and socially being fit is a sign of good health. In this manner, public health, it is defined by World Health Organization as not only the absence of a disease, but the state of physical, mental and social well-being. And how can this be achieved? How can we achieve physical, mental and social well-being? So in order to achieve physical, mental and social well-being, we need to achieve this state by taking community efforts. That is, efforts in a community that should be taken to achieve physical, mental and social well-being. So here we can prevent the disease and we can prolong life. This is done by maintaining and providing a sanitary environment, controlling communicable and non-communicable diseases, educating the community on health and health-related topics, organizing nursing and medical services for early diagnosis and prevention of disease, and developing a social machinery to ensure that the adequate standard of living is achieved. And this is done by maintaining health, longevity, which are the human birthrights of each and every individual. And maintaining health and longevity is a birthright of each and every individual. And therefore, World Health Organization has integrated environmental health with public health. And according to World Health Organization, environmental health comprises those aspects of human health, including quality of life, that are determined by physical, chemical, biological, social and psychosocial processes in the environment. यहाँ पर हम फिजिकल, केमिकल और बायोलॉजिकल जो प्रोसेसेस है उनके बारे में अगर हम देखें तो फिजिकल, केमिकल एंड बायोलॉजिकल प्रोसेसेस, they cannot be clearly differentiated. These processes, they are interlinked. अगर हम बायोजियोकेमिकल साइकिल्स का एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं, जिसमें ऑक्सीजन साइकिल, नाइट्रोजन साइकिल, फॉस्फोरस साइकिल, वाटर साइकिल, ये जो साइकिल्स है इसमें फिजिकल, केमिकल और बायोलॉजिकल प्रोसेसेस जो होते हैं वो एक दूसरे पर डिपेंडेंट होते हैं. फिजिकल, केमिकल and biological processes, they are interdependent, and hence we cannot differentiate these physical, chemical and biological processes from each other, and therefore these processes may be called as the interlinked processes. और यहाँ पर जो वाटर साइकिल है, यहाँ पर जो रेट ऑफ इवेपोरेशन है, it is dependent on the temperature or the heat obtained from the sun. And in oxygen and carbon cycle, different factors, that is the physical, chemical and biological factors, are involved. And due to these processes which occur in the environment, there are differences in geography or the availability of the natural resources in different locations or different localities. And as a result of this, some diseases or some health problems, they are specified to a particular area or a particular region. Here the example can be given of the sickle cell anemia. This is a prevalent disease in the eastern districts of Maharashtra, that is the Vidarbha region, in the Satpura ranges, in the north and in some parts of Marathwada. And the percentage of these sickle cell anemia carriers, it is up to 0 to 35% in these regions. और दूसरा जो एग्जाम्पल यहाँ पर हम दे सकते हैं वो गॉइटर का है. गॉइटर, इट इज द इंक्रीज इन द साइज ऑफ द थायराइड ग्लैंड, एंड दिस डिजीज इज कॉज्ड ड्यू टू द डेफिशिएंसी ऑफ आयोडीन. It is more specifically, or it is restricted to the areas, that is the hilly areas and the Himalayas, which are away from the sea coast, and hence the iodine content of the hill soil, it is negligible, and as a result of this, the food grown in such soils, it is also iodine deficient, and therefore goiter, it is a common disease in the Himalayas, which are away from the sea coast. And now let us go on to the next point, that is social and psychosocial processes in the environment. So what are the social processes in the environment and how they are affecting the public health or the environmental health? So here the economic conditions, the climate or the pollution in a particular region, or the culture of a particular region, availability of the natural resources, these are the factors which are affecting the environmental health or the public health, and these are the social factors. यहाँ पर हम जो एग्जाम्पल ले सकते हैं वो मालन्यूट्रिशन का एग्जाम्पल है. जो अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज है, दीज आर द पुअर कंट्रीज, and malnutrition, it is the major problem in these poor African countries. And lastly, these psychosocial processes. So these psychosocial processes, they involve healthy interactions within the family, at workplace, or within the society, or within the community where we live. These are the psychosocial processes which affect the environmental health. And lastly, let us understand the statement which is quoted over here, that environmental health, it refers to the theory and practice of assessing, correcting, controlling and preventing those factors in the environment that can potentially adversely affect the health of present and the future generations. तो यहाँ पर हम ये जान ले कि हमारी जो प्रेजेंट एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ है और फ्यूचर एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ है, यानी प्रेजेंट जनरेशंस और फ्यूचर जनरेशंस की एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ, ये बुरी तरह से प्रभावित हो सकती है. और किन चीज़ों से ये प्रभावित हो सकती है उसके बारे में असेसमेंट करना, करेक्शन करना, कंट्रोल करना इन चीज़ों को और प्रिवेंट करना ये बहुत ज़रूरी है, जिसकी वजह से हमारी जो प्रेजेंट एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ है और आने वाली जो एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ है फ्यूचर जनरेशन्स के लिए, वो हम ठीक तरह से रख पाएंगे और उसमें अच्छी तरह से सुधार ला सकेंगे। ये जो डेफिनेशन वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने दी है, हमने जो इंट्रोडक्टरी पार्ट में पढ़ा है, हम देख सकते हैं कि ये जो डेफिनेशन है वो ब्रॉड ऐसी डेफिनेशन है और यहाँ पर कम्युनिटी बेस्ड अप्रोच को इम्पोर्टेंस दिया गया है। और इसलिए जब भी हमें एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ में सुधार लाना हो या एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ ठीक स्थिति में रखने के लिए कोई पर्याप्त हमें प्लान्स करने हो, तब हम यहाँ पर कम्युनिटी बेस्ड अप्रोच को ध्यान में रखते हुए कम्युनिटी लेवल पे ये प्लान्स बनाएं और वहाँ पर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन जो है इन प्लान्स का वो कम्युनिटी लेवल पे हो, ये यहाँ पर इम्पोर्टेंट है और ये हम ध्यान में रखें। दूसरी जो बात यहाँ पर है कि एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ इट इज अफेक्टेड बाय अ लॉट ऑफ फैक्टर्स एंड दीज फैक्टर्स they are the naturally occurring factors which are present in the environment. These are the external factors which are affecting a person's health, and these factors are the physical, chemical, biological and psychosocial factors as we have already studied. And therefore it is very necessary to keep a preventive approach rather than addressing a health problem after its occurrence, to provide not only the present communities a good health but also a good health for the future generations to come. इस प्रकार एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ का जो कंसेप्ट है ये पॉपुलेशन पर आधारित है, क्योंकि ये कम्युनिटी बेस्ड अप्रोच है and it is also a preventive approach to maintain environmental health or social health, and therefore a study of demographics, that is a study of population, it is very important in this case, and therefore we are going to begin here a new topic, introduction to population demographics. तो यहाँ पर जो डेफिनेशन है पॉपुलेशन की वो डेफिनेशन हम पढ़ लें। A population is defined as a group of individuals of the same species living and interbreeding within a given area. And members of a population often rely on the same resources and are subject to similar environmental constraints and depend on the availability of other members to persist over time. तो यहाँ पर ये जरूरी है कि पॉपुलेशन में जो स्पीसीज है, these species they should be interbreeding or they should be of the same type. These species they are called as the interbreeding species within a given area, and therefore if we consider a human population, अगर हम human population के बारे में सोचते हैं तो human population it is using the same type of resources and it is having the same type of environmental limitations and availability of other members also it is the same. और फिर यहाँ पर एक सवाल ऐसा है कि ये जो पॉपुलेशन है, हाउ वी आर गोइंग टू स्टडी दिस पॉपुलेशन। तो पॉपुलेशन इकोलॉजिस्ट जो है वो पॉपुलेशन का ऑब्जेक्टिवली स्टडी करने के लिए डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स का स्टडी करते हैं और जो स्टैटिस्टिकल मेजर्स है किसी भी पॉपुलेशन को लेकर उसे हम डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स कहते हैं। सो अ पॉइंट टू बी रिमेंबर्ड हियर इज दैट population ecologists they rely on a series of statistical measures, and these statistical measures they are known as demographic parameters, and these demographic parameters they describe or they represent a population. और यहाँ पर जो पॉपुलेशन का स्टडी करने की जो मेथड है इसमें जो इंटरैक्शंस है, इंटरैक्शंस अमॉन्ग द सेम इंडिविजुअल्स इन अ पॉपुलेशन इट इज स्टडीड, एंड हाउ दीज इंडिविजुअल्स दे आर अफेक्टिंग देयर एनवायरनमेंट इट इज ऑल्सो स्टडीड इन दिस पॉपुलेशन स्टडी, एंड देयरफॉर दिस इज द मेन इंटेंशन, दैट इज इंटरैक्शंस विद इन अ पॉपुलेशन एंड इंटरैक्शन ऑफ अ पॉपुलेशन within the environment or with the environment, it is studied by using this demography. And therefore, the field of science interested in collecting and analyzing these numbers, that is the statistics or the statistical data, it is analyzed and it is termed as population demographics, or it is known as demography. And therefore, demography, it is the study of characteristics of a population. And these characteristics, that is the characteristics of a population, they are always changing over time, and a mathematical description of how these characteristics they change over time, it is also studied in demography. यहाँ पर अगर हम एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन का, तो प्राचीन काल से हम देखते आ रहे हैं कि ये जो ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन है, इनमें बहुत से कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स जो है वो चेंज होते आ रहे हैं. दीज कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन और एनी अदर पॉपुलेशन, they are changing over time, and the study of these characteristics, it is done by mathematical description, and different parameters are necessary for this mathematical description. These parameters are demographic parameters, and they are population size, population density, age structure, fecundity or birth rate, mortality, and sex ratio. So we are going to study these demographic parameters in details. Before actual discussion of the demographic parameters, let us first summarize whatever we have discussed previously. So firstly, the definition of environmental health and how it is integrated with public health. Secondly, the community approach and preventive approach of environmental health, and the factors or the processes which are affecting the environmental health. These factors are physical factors, chemical factors, biological factors or processes, and again social and psychosocial processes. इस तरह से हमने ये पढ़ा है कि कम्युनिटी अप्रोच पे बेस्ड और प्रिवेंटिव अप्रोच पे बेस्ड जो एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ है उसकी डेफिनेशन वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने दी है, और इसीलिए हमें जो कोई प्लान्स एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ के लिए बनाने हैं वह कम्युनिटी लेवल पे होने चाहिए, और इसलिए कम्युनिटी लेवल पे उनका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होना भी ज़रूरी है. और ये जो 5 पॉइंट्स है, maintaining and providing sanitary environment, controlling diseases, educating the community, and diagnosis of diseases, prevention of diseases, and maintaining a proper social system for a proper or a adequate standard of living. These 5 points we have discussed previously, and therefore to maintain environmental health, a community approach needs to be followed, as this environmental health, the definition of environmental health and the theory of environmental health, it is based on the community approach according to the definition of World Health Organization. environmental health जो है वो maintain करने के लिए हमें जो फैक्टर्स है एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ को डैमेज करने वाले, एनवायरमेंटल हेल्थ को खतरा पहुंचाने वाले जो फैक्टर्स है उसका असेसमेंट करना, करेक्शन, कंट्रोल और प्रिवेंशन करना ये ज़रूरी है, और इसी को हम कम्युनिटी अप्रोच कहते हैं. और ये जो कम्युनिटी अप्रोच है ये ठीक तरह से हमें इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए पॉपुलेशन और डेमोग्राफिक्स जो है उसके बारे में सही ज्ञान होना आवश्यक है, और इसलिए हम जो डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स है वो डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स के बारे में यहाँ पर डिस्कस करने वाले हैं. पॉपुलेशन का स्टडी करने के लिए जो पैरामीटर्स यूज़ किए जाते हैं उन्हें हम डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स कहते हैं, और ये जो डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स है इनमें पॉपुलेशन साइज, पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी, एज स्ट्रक्चर, फेकंडिटी, मॉर्टेलिटी एंड सेक्स रेशियो, ये जो है ये डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर्स है. और इनमें से ये जो फर्स्ट डेमोग्राफिक पैरामीटर है ये पॉपुलेशन साइज है, ये बेसिक पैरामीटर है, और ये पैरामीटर के बारे में हम अब डिस्कस करते हैं. तो पॉपुलेशन साइज जो है ये बहुत ही फंडामेंटल और सिंपल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है. इट इज अ फंडामेंटल और अ बेसिक सिंपल पैरामीटर. एंड पॉपुलेशन साइज, it is defined as the number of individuals in a subjectively designated geographical range. तो ये डेफिनेशन पूरी तरह से हम समझ लेते हैं. सब्जेक्टिवली डेजिग्नेटेड जोग्राफिकल रेंज जो है, इसमें हम कोई भी इंडिविजुअल की पॉपुलेशन हमें डिसाइड करनी होती है तो हम एक स्पेसिफिक जोग्राफिकल रेंज सिलेक्ट करते हैं और वहाँ पर कोई भी स्पीसीज अगर होंगी तो वो स्पीसीज जो है, इंडिविजुअल स्पीसीज है, वो हम सिलेक्ट करके वो स्पीसीज का जो सेंसस है या वो स्पीसीज की जो गिनती है वो गिनती हम करते हैं. और यहाँ पर जो जोग्राफिकल रेंज है, वी कैन डिसाइड दिस जोग्राफिकल रेंज and we can decide the species which we are going to determine, and this population of these species, it is determined, and this is a character which is known as population size. Population size जब हम determine करते हैं, किसी भी individual को locate करते हैं, तो locating of individuals in a census or a full count of every individual, it is impossible. यानी ये जो स्पीसीज लोकेट करने के लिए, पॉपुलेशन साइज जो है वो डिटरमाइन करने के लिए हम जब इंडिविजुअल्स की गिनती करते हैं तो ऐसी गिनती जो है ये इम्पॉसिबल है. वी कैन नॉट गेट अ फुल काउंट ऑफ एवरी इंडिविजुअल. तो ये जो फुल काउंट है ये नहीं मिल पाता है, इसलिए इकोलॉजिस्ट्स दे काउंट इंडिविजुअल्स इन अ स्मॉल सैंपल एरिया. यानी कोई भी सैंपल एरिया सिलेक्ट करके वहां पर हम नंबर ऑफ इंडिविजुअल्स लोकेट करके दिस सैंपल इज देन एक्सट्रापोलेटेड टू अ लार्जर रीजन. एंड दस पॉपुलेशन साइज, even if it is a fundamental and a simple parameter, it is a very important parameter with significant implications for the dynamics as a whole. Now that we have studied the concept of population size, here we are going to study about the distinctive behavior of a population. So the population may be a large population or a small population, and each type of population, that is a large population and a small population, they have their own characteristics. So first, let us study the characteristics of a large population. So a large population has a maximum sustainability, that is a carrying capacity. Secondly, there is a greater competition among the individuals for the resources. Third, there is a shift in a predator-prey relationship. Fourth, large growth in population may exceed the carrying capacity. And fifth is lower fecundity, that is the ability to reproduce. अब यहाँ पर जो टर्म है कैरिंग कैपेसिटी, ये टर्म ठीक तरह से समझने के लिए हम यहाँ पर एक एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं. और नॉर्थ अमेरिका जो है वहाँ पर कॉलोनाइजेशन की वजह से, यानी जो ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन इट वाज इंक्रीज्ड इन नॉर्थ अमेरिका, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ इट influenced the environment, and also the North American deer population, it was increased, and thus there was a change in carrying capacity. ये एग्जाम्पल हम यहाँ पर डिस्कस करते हैं. यहाँ पर हमें ये भी समझना जरूरी है कि प्रीडेटर प्रे इंटरैक्शंस जो है या प्रीडेटर प्रे रिलेशनशिप है, हाउ दिस प्रीडेटर प्रे रिलेशनशिप्स दे आर एक्टिंग इन अ नेचुरल एनवायरनमेंट. So whenever these predator-prey relationships or the predator-prey interactions, they are happening among the predators and the prey in a natural environment, these interactions, they are always balanced. और ये बात समझना भी बहुत ज़रूरी है कि ये जो predator-prey interactions है, predator-prey relations है, इनमें डिस्टर्बेंस हम करते हैं ह्यूमन इंटरफियरेंस की वजह से. यहाँ पर डिस्टर्बेंस होता है और उसकी वजह से द इंटरैक्शंस बिटवीन द प्रीडेटर एंड द प्रे और द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द प्रीडेटर एंड द प्रे, दे आर इम्बैलेंस्ड और दे बिकम डिस्टर्ब्ड. तो यहाँ पर भी यही हुआ है कि ड्यू टू द कॉलोनाइजेशन ऑफ नॉर्थ अमेरिका बाय द यूरोपियंस, the human population had increased to a greater extent, and the wolves, they were hunted. The wolves, they were hunted for protecting the humans, and as a result of this, the population of deer, it increased. तो यहाँ पर जो उल्फ की पॉपुलेशन है वो डिक्रीज होने की वजह से और डियर की जो पॉपुलेशन है वो इंक्रीज होने की वजह से डियर्स दे फेस्ड स्टार्वेशन। तो इस स्थिति में हम ये कहते हैं कि ये जो डियर है, डियर्स दे सफर्ड स्टार्वेशन and they had reached their carrying capacity. So this is a simple meaning of carrying capacity, which we can understand through this simple example of a North American deer. Carrying capacity और predator prey relationship या predator prey interaction, ये दोनों concepts समझने के बाद हम फिर से ये जो small population है इसके जो अलग तरह से जो characters है, ये characters हम study करते हैं। और ये small population जो है, it has its own characters. So here the characters of a small population, they may be stated as individuals, they are susceptible to random deaths or also deaths due to natural disasters, for example, fires, floods and diseases. And these populations, that is the small populations, they are at a greater risk of extinction. And also they have a hard time to find mates. यहाँ पर जो mates होते हैं रिप्रोडक्शन के लिए, वो mates मिलने में यहाँ पर थोड़ी से प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं और इसलिए only a few individuals they can reproduce, and therefore these are the characters of a small population which we have studied here. Let us remember that the demographic parameters are population size, population density, age structure, fecundity, mortality and sex ratio. And now we are going to study the second demographic parameter, that is population density. So population density, it is a complex description of population size and it may be defined as the number of individuals per unit area or per unit volume. And here the example is the number of crows per square kilometer or the number of planktons per liter, that is the number of aquatic organisms per liter. Planktons, they mean the aquatic organisms. And as we all know that individuals, they are either added into a population or they are removed from a population, and therefore population density, it changes with time, that is it is time dependent. So it is a very important point that population density is dependent upon time, and also when some species are there and they are closely related species. अगर ऐसे species है जो closely related species है, यहाँ पर जो example है gannet birds का, वो example दिया हुआ है. So closely related species, they also show different population density. So let us discuss here about gannet birds. So here the gannet birds and the boobies, they are the two types of birds or the two types of species in the family Sulidae, or together they are called as Sulids. हम यहाँ पर boobies और gannets ये दोनों मिला के Sulids ऐसे इसको बोलते हैं और ये Sulidae फैमिली में आते हैं और ये जो है इनको सी बर्ड्स हम बोलते हैं. तो ये जो सी बर्ड्स है, these are closely related to each other, and even if they are closely related to each other, they show a variation in population density. This means that closely related species also have different population densities, and the example here is of gannet birds and boobies. So it is a very simple thing that population density, it changes, and there are two types of changes which take place in population density, and they are very simple. सीधी सी बात है, population density, it will either decrease or increase. Very simple, that population density, it either decreases or increases. And then in which conditions this changes takes place, that is also important. And then population density, it increases when the birth rates they are higher, and immigration, that is influx of individuals, it takes place into any locality, then the population density, in that locality it increases, and whenever the death rates they are higher, or emigration, that is movement of individuals out of the population, it takes place, then the population density in that location or in that region it decreases. Here is a simple example of Siberian crane which migrates from Siberia. As we all know that it is a native of Siberia, and it migrates from Siberia to Bharatpur in Rajasthan to save itself from severe winter conditions. And actually this happens in the month of October, or we can say that in mid-October these Siberian cranes, they migrate from Siberia and they reach up to Bharatpur in Rajasthan to save themselves or to protect themselves from the severe winter. And this is clearly indicative of the fact that the population density it changes due to this migration of birds from Siberia to Rajasthan. And we can say that in Siberia the population density of the Siberian birds it decreases during the months from October to March or April, and in India the population density of these Siberian birds it increases due to this migration or influx of these Siberian birds into India. As we have already studied the distinctive characters of population size, that is a large population size and a small population size, similarly there are distinctive characteristics of population density also, and these distinctive characters are low population density and a high population density. And the factors which affect population density, they are of two types, that is the density dependent factors and the density independent factors. So these factors which affect the population density, the density dependent factors are predators, competition, migration and disease. And the density independent factors are weather, fire and flooding. तो यहाँ पर अगर हम देखें तो डेंसिटी इंडिपेंडेंट फैक्टर्स जो है इसमें वेदर, फायर एंड फ्लडिंग, तो इसका मतलब क्या है, ये डेंसिटी इंडिपेंडेंट फैक्टर्स है, इसका मतलब यह है कि these factors, that is weather, fire and flooding, they are affecting both the types of population densities, that is a high population density as well as a low population density. तो एक सिंपल सी बात है कि अगर ये जो वेदर, फ्लडिंग है या फॉरेस्ट फायर है, ये अगर कहीं पे होते हैं, ऐसी दुर्घटना कहीं पे होती है, तो ऐसा नहीं होगा कि ये जो फैक्टर्स है these are only affecting a low population density, they will be affecting both the high population density as well as a low population density. यानी हर एक जीव जो हाई पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी दिखाता है या लो पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी दिखाता है, हर एक जीव को ये अफेक्ट करेंगे. इसको कहते हैं हम डेंसिटी इंडिपेंडेंट फैक्टर्स विच आर अफेक्टिंग द पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी. और दूसरी बात यह है कि यहाँ पर एक सवाल है कि विच आर द प्रॉब्लम्स विच आर फेस्ड बाय अ हाई पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी. So the problems, they are disease, or these populations or these species will have to migrate due to food starvation or lack of availability of food, or there may be competition between predators. The competition is a tough competition, and therefore here these are the problems of a high density population, and these factors, they are therefore called as the density dependent factors which affect the population density. So with the discussion of these two parameters, that is population size and population density, let us proceed on to the third parameter, that is age structure. And this age structure, it is defined as the proportion of the number of individuals of each age in a population. यानी यहाँ पर हर आयु के जो इंडिविजुअल्स है उनकी जो गिनती है वो एज स्ट्रक्चर में होती है। और एज स्ट्रक्चर, व्हाट इज इट्स इम्पोर्टेंस? सो एज स्ट्रक्चर, इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड एंड प्रेडिक्ट द पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ। तो यहाँ पर एक सीधी सी बात है कि एज स्ट्रक्चर जब हम डिटरमाइन करते हैं, यानी हर एज के जो इंडिविजुअल्स है उस पॉपुलेशन में, उसका हम डिटर्मिनेशन करते हैं। वी आर डिटरमाइनिंग द नंबर ऑफ इंडिविजुअल्स of each age in that specific population, then we should also know that all the individuals, they do not contribute equally to a population. यानी वो जो एज, अलग अलग एज के इंडिविजुअल्स है, they are contributing to population, but they are contributing in different manner. And it should be remembered that a profile of the population size and age structure of cohorts, it helps us to understand the current and future growth of any population. And these cohorts, they help us to understand the growth of any population, and secondly, reproductive potential of that population. And here an important thing is that all individuals, they do not contribute equally to a population, and hence it is necessary to characterize the age structure, that is, classify the age structure. And therefore, the age structure is classified into 3 different cohorts. These are juvenile cohort, reproductive cohort, and old cohort. And as we can see here, that a large population of juvenile cohorts, it indicates a faster future growth. A large population of reproductive cohorts, it indicates rapidly expanding population. And old cohorts, if it has a large population, it indicates a rapidly declining population. And lastly, representation of age structure. So age structure, it is graphically represented with a population pyramid. And age structure in a population pyramid, it is not always pyramidal in shape, because the younger cohort, it has a larger population than the older cohort. And now let us study the next demographic parameter, that is fecundity. And this word has a Latin origin. Fecundity means fertility. So as the word fecundity, it means fruitfulness or fertility, the word fecundity may be referred to as reproductive ability. And as we know that age structure suggests that some individuals have a greater impact on population growth, these individuals, they are categorized as reproductive cohorts. And fecundity, it is defined as, it is the number of offsprings an individual or a population which is able to produce during a given period of time. This is known as fecundity. And then the question comes here, how this parameter, that is fecundity or reproductive ability, it is calculated or estimated. So fecundity, it is calculated in age specific birth rates. Firstly, it is the number of births per unit time. Secondly, number of births per female per unit time, or fecundity is the number of births per 1000 individuals per unit time. And here again, the concepts of fecundity, they include maximum fecundity and realized fecundity. Maximum fecundity is also referred to as theoretical or physiological fecundity, and realized fecundity is also termed as ecological fecundity. And let us understand these concepts which are related to fecundity. So now let us understand the differences between maximum fecundity and ecological fecundity. So this maximum fecundity, it is also known as theoretical fecundity or physiological fecundity, whereas realized fecundity is known as ecological fecundity. And then theoretical fecundity is the maximum number of offsprings produced in a population assuming no ecological constraints or limitations, whereas realized or ecological fecundity is the number of offsprings produced in a population under actual environmental conditions. And secondly, this maximum fecundity, it remains constant for populations, whereas this ecological fecundity, it varies over time-based parameters like population size, density and age structure. Now let us understand how fecundity it is affected. So fecundity, it is affected by two types of factors. First is the external factors and secondly the density dependent factors which affect a large population. So it should be remembered that density dependent factors, they affect a large population, and external factors, they affect both the small populations as well as the large populations. And here external factors, they include food and habitat availability, and density dependent factors, they affect the population, and these populations are large populations. They regulate the populations and they affect these large populations by different types of mechanisms. So density dependent regulation of population, it is achieved by affecting a large population, and a negative feedback, that is decline in such populations, it is observed. तो यहाँ पर ये देखना ज़रूरी है कि जहाँ लार्ज पॉपुलेशंस होते हैं वहाँ पर इस पॉपुलेशंस में डिक्लाइन होना ज़रूरी है, और ये जो डिक्लाइन इन पॉपुलेशन है it is achieved by density dependent regulation of population, and this is known as negative feedback or decline in population. And therefore in large populations birth control is achieved and large populations are controlled, and this is the way in which fecundity is affected, that is density dependent regulation of population. And there are different mechanisms to control high density populations, and one such mechanism is stress syndrome mechanism, which we are going to study here in details. तो यहाँ पर स्ट्रेस सिंड्रोम मैकेनिज्म समझने के लिए हम व्हाइट फुटेड माइस का एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं, जहाँ पर रिप्रोडक्टिव रेट जो है ये व्हाइट फुटेड माइस में it is controlled by a mechanism which is known as stress syndrome mechanism. And here, as we already know that wherever there is a high density of population, there are aggressive interactions between the individuals, even if the resources like food or shelter, they are unlimited. तो यहाँ पर हम ये देखें कि जब जब हाई डेंसिटी होती है पॉपुलेशन में, then in these conditions the interactions between individuals, they are highly aggressive interactions, and even if the resources they are unlimited, they are available to a maximum extent, then also such populations they exhibit aggressive interactions. And due to these aggressive interactions, this triggers a stress syndrome in which hormonal changes occur. As a result of this, sexual maturation is delayed, causing reproductive organs to shrink and depress the immune system. And as the reproductive organs they shrink, the birth rate it is controlled, and as there is a depression in immune system, there is a rise in death rates. तो यहाँ पर यह समझना ज़रूरी है कि स्ट्रेस सिंड्रोम मैकेनिज्म की वजह से जो रिप्रोडक्टिव ऑर्गन्स का श्रिंकेज है वो होता है, इसकी वजह से ये जो बर्थ रेट है इट इज अफेक्टेड, दैट इज इट इज डिक्रीज्ड, एंड ड्यू टू डिप्रेशन इन द इम्यून सिस्टम द डेथ रेट्स दे आर इंक्रीज्ड. एंड इन दिस मैनर दिस स्ट्रेस सिंड्रोम मैकेनिज्म it increases the death rate and decreases the birth rates, and it controls a high density population. It is a very simple mechanism. And now the next parameter, demographic parameter, mortality. And mortality, it is the measure of individual deaths in a population and serves as a counterbalance to fecundity. So it is very important that mortality, it serves as a counterbalance to fecundity. This point, it is a very important point to remember. And like fecundity, mortality is also measured in rates, and it is measured as first, death per unit time. That is the number of individuals that die in a given period. And secondly, percent death per unit time. That is, it is the proportion of the population that dies in a given period. It is known as mortality. So this mortality, it is a counterbalance to fecundity. This is a very important point to remember here. And similar to fecundity concepts, mortality concepts are minimum mortality, which is also known as theoretical mortality, and realized mortality, which is known as ecological mortality. So what is minimum mortality? So minimum mortality, it is the theoretically minimum number of deaths in a population that dies in a given period, assuming no ecological constraints. And ecological mortality, it is the actually observed number of losses, that is deaths in a population under actual environmental conditions. And secondly, minimum mortality, it is constant for a population, whereas realized mortality or ecological mortality, it varies over time based on dynamics, that is external and internal population. So these are the concepts. These are similar to fecundity concepts, and these are known as mortality concepts. And it should be remembered that minimum mortality, it is always less than the realized mortality. And now let us understand the next demographic parameter, that is sex ratio. So as we have already studied population size, sex ratio is also a simple concept like population size. And then sex ratio, how is sex ratio defined? So sex ratio of a population is determined by the number of females per 1000 males. So this is a very simple definition of sex ratio, and now let us study this sex ratio in detail. So now let us understand the important points of sex ratio, how it is important in ecology. And here the first point is that ecologists, they measure the number of males and females to construct a sex ratio, and the number of males and females, they should be comparable so that the reproducing individuals, they find a mate so as to produce an offspring. Thirdly, sex ratio, it is important to predict the population growth or decline. That is, whether the population, it is a growing population or it shows a decline. This is determined by sex ratio. And lastly, different sex ratios indicate some different characteristics of a population. And now let us study these different sex ratios in ecology. So as variations are seen in sex ratio in ecology, the sex ratio is of 1:1 type of sex ratio, 3:1 type of sex ratio, and a skewed sex ratio. So 1:1 type of sex ratio, here the growth rate, it remains constant. 3:1 type of sex ratio favoring females, it indicates a decline in male population, and such populations, they show increased growth rate due to the increase in number of females. And thirdly, the skewed sex ratio, which is skewed towards the male, that is the number of males, it has increased. And such a skewed sex ratio, it shows rising population in species where the males, they contribute significantly to the offspring rearing. So this is all about sex ratio, that is the last parameter among the demographic parameters. So population size, population density, age structure, fecundity, mortality and sex ratio. These are the demographic parameters which we have discussed in this session, and in the next session we are going to study these parameters with reference to India. And this is all for today now, and have a good day. Okay.